Hello everybody, Kyle here. I'm going to talk about Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2. I was fortunate enough to see the early fan screening in IMAX that they had a couple of days ago, and I thought before I gave my review back then that I should kind of sit and think about the film for the last couple of days. I even reread my version of Dune, and I want to really compare how the film worked, how the book works. And I will say that, to give you some background, I kind of was introduced to Dune through Zoe Saldana because I knew of the book and heard of the book, but it was through her interviews during the Guardians of the Galaxy press tour back in 2014, where she was saying how, as a child, her favorite science fiction story was Dune and how she wanted to be a Bene Gesserit as a child. And for some reason, that really captivated me, and I was like, maybe this book should interest me. And I read it, but I was at an age, I feel, that I didn't quite grasp what was going on. I couldn't even finish the first chapter or so of the book because it was very challenging for me to read back then. And it wasn't until I went into college that this movie was announced, and I decided to get back into the book. And it took me about a year to read. It is almost like you have to read a page a day almost to really fully grasp what's going on. But I love this book, and I thought that what really captured me was Frank Herbert's detail and his dedication to this world, and a lot of the more religious, philosophical, ecological themes he was going for. So when the first Dune came out, Dune Part 1, I was so excited for it. And that film is, to this day, one of the greatest theatrical experiences I've ever been in. I saw it in IMAX with a bunch of my friends, and I was just blown away by the sound design, by the actors, by the writing. And then I just couldn't wait for Dune Part 2. So we're at Dune Part 2, and I will say that on my initial viewing of the film, I really loved this movie. From beginning to end, it really featured an immersive experience at the movies, and it had some of the best sound design, some of the best scenes I've seen in films. There's this one opening scene of the film with the Fremen trying to stop some of the Harkonnen soldiers. Then there's another scene in the film where you have a gladiator arena battle with Austin Butler's character Fade Ralpha. It's situated in this black and white aesthetic, and the cinematography is just gorgeous, but the scene itself is really a really great entrance into the villain, a great introduction, I shall say. And I thought the worm ride is just unbelievably exciting. It's one of the most vivid sequences I've seen in theaters, and on the IMAX screen, it really, really stood out. That being said, I left the movie kind of torn because I've read this book about 2 to 3 times, and the thing I love so much about Part 1 is it really captures this book to a T. There are things that aren't in the movie that are in the book, but what I liked about it was it wasn't, really important material they left out of Dune Part 1. It was stuff that you could kind of fill in the gaps. Like, this happened in the movie, we just didn't see it, but it isn't necessary enough for them to tell us. Now, Dune Part 2 is a bit different. Denis Villeneuve kind of makes more of a looser adaptation of the second part of the novel. There are scenes in here like Gurney Halleck with, reuniting with Paul. You see this in the trailer. And they also have like another scene in the book that is like the gladiator arena scene in the movie. But there are a lot of scenes in this movie that are quite different from the book, and also scenes that are just left out entirely. One of those being the fact that Thufir Hawat, who is in the first film, and he is the mentat that works for the family. He's played by, I believe his name's like Stephen McKinley Henderson, I think, but he is completely cut out of this second half. And in the book, he actually plays a pretty substantial role in the second half. Another character that they decided to cut out of this film in a way is, and now I'm going to go into a bit of spoilers for anybody that hasn't seen this film or read the book. So if you are afraid of spoilers, you can turn it off and watch this part of the review when you see the movie. But they changed Alia Atreides' role in the film. In the book, Alia Atreides, Paul's sister, is a young child that is preborn, and she is imbued with the knowledge of all the Bene Gesserit and Reverend Mothers that have come before her. And this goes into play at the end of the film, where she is about 3 years old, I'd say, and she attacks and kills the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. In this film, she's never born because the storyline itself takes place over the course of months instead of years. And she's just inside the womb and she's communicating to Lady Jessica through that. But it's a very odd change, and I wasn't too happy with it at first when I saw the film, because I love Alia. She's actually my favorite character. I love the idea of this little child being the one that brings destruction to the Harkonnens and to the Empire, and it was such a really intriguing inclusion to the story. But I will say, over the last couple of days and rereading this book, I understand why they did it. And I think what works so well with this change is now we actually get a confrontation between Paul Atreides and the Baron Harkonnen. And we get to see him meet his grandfather and kill his grandfather in this film. So that is something that I thought was really, really needed, I guess, because it's kind of anticlimactic in the book, where this guy that orchestrates all of this, the Baron, doesn't even get a confrontation with Paul, the main protagonist of the story. So that was a change. But aside from that, though, I loved what they did with the Fremen. I thought they captured them perfectly. I thought that they do some really cool stuff with Jessica here, make her a little bit more sinister than she is in the book. But I think that only adds to, how much of an interesting character she is in the book. And they just make her even more interesting, I think, in this film. Because in the second part, she doesn't have as, I think, large of a role as she plays in the first part. Now, Chani is one of the big, additions here, because she has a little bit of a different role here to play. She's more rebellious against Paul and the Kwisatz Haderach, Mahdi prophecy, Lisan al-Gaib. And at first, you're wondering, how do you feel about it? But I think it works really well. It gives Zendaya a lot to play. It gives her a really fascinating character, one with agency. And I think this film sets up the sequel, which will be Dune Messiah, really well. And that was one thing I didn't expect. This film's really the second part of a 3-part trilogy, instead of it being the second part of a 2-part story, which is more so what the book is. The book is really just one book, and then they made the sequel. But now they're trying to set up the sequel, so now they have to deal with it. So I think that was a really smart idea for them to do that. It also kind of gives us this franchise that now we're going to get excited for year after year. And I also think that the casting here is superb. I think that Timothée Chalamet is incredible in this film. But for me, really, the standouts are Austin Butler and Léa Seydoux. Now, Léa Seydoux has a small role here, but she plays Margot Fenring, Lady Margot Fenring, who's a Bene Gesserit. And in the book, she has a really small role. But they add her into a larger role here, to the point where you really get to see what the Bene Gesserit are like, what they are doing, what they're doing with the bloodlines. And I think it works really well. She's this seductive, I don't want to say truth sayer, but she's like a manipulator, and you can tell that Lea Seydoux just relishes in this role. But Austin Butler, he just delivers as Feyd-Rautha, and he gives some performance. Like, people are comparing him to Heath Ledger as Joker, and I will say I understand the comparison, because both of these characters are really compelling, and you cannot take your eyes off of the screen when they're on. They're just almost fun to watch, and it's a villain that is wicked, but also a villain that has his own points of view and his own goals, and oh, such a great character. And it all like climaxes into this great knife fight between him and Paul Atreides. So yeah, Dune Part 2, I will say some of the changes aren't like the first part, so I wouldn't say it's like a perfect adaptation, because like the first one I think was, but it's as close as you can get in today's age, being an adaptation of Dune. And yeah, I think that it might not have as great a pacing as the first film, but the score, the acting, the writing, the cinematography by Greg Fraser, the editing is still pretty top notch, and it's still one of the best franchises right now, and one of the best films of the year. So I'm going to see it again, and I'm going to see, maybe I will even like it more. But right now, let me know what you guys think of Dune Part 2. Have you seen it yet? Or are you going to see it? And let me know your thoughts. Okay, guys, take care. Bye.